Some people love you so quietly, you mistake their silence for forgetting. A 74-year-old widow and her daughter inherit a boarded-up house in Cleveland from an uncle nobody spoke to for 40 years. The family called him crazy, a hermit, a man not worth remembering. They almost refuse the inheritance. They go inside expecting dust, rot, and nothing else. Then the daughter finds a locked door in the basement. They break it open. Inside is a room, perfectly preserved, temperature-controlled, and every wall is covered with framed photographs. Hundreds of them. Every birthday, every graduation, every wedding, every milestone of every family member who cut him off. He was there, in the back of crowds, across streets, behind windows, watching, never once approaching. In the center of the room sits a single chair facing one wall, dedicated entirely to his sister, with a handwritten note pinned beneath her wedding photo. But what did that note say? If the story moves you, stay right here. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. That part one remember clearly because Tuesdays were the days I visited my mother at Greenfield Assisted Living in Columbus. I'd bring her a decaf from the place on 5th Street. She liked it with too much cream. We'd sit in her room and talk about nothing important. The weather, the crossword she couldn't finish, whether the nurses were being kind or just polite. That was our routine. Quiet, predictable, safe. But that Tuesday, when I walked in, she wasn't doing the crossword. She was sitting on the edge of her bed holding an envelope. Her hands were steady, but her face wasn't. Something in her eyes looked like she'd just been slapped by a ghost. "What's that?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just held it out to me. It was from a law firm in Cleveland. Brennan, Lyle and Associates. I'd never heard of them. The letter was addressed to Margaret Purcell Hensley, my mother. It said that one Edward James Purcell had died 3 weeks prior and that, per his last will and testament, his sole property, a residential home located at 4412 Arden Road, Cleveland, Ohio, was to be transferred to his surviving sister, Margaret. I looked at her. Edward Purcell. That's Uncle Eddie. Her jaw tightened. Don't call him that. Now here's the thing. I barely knew anything about Uncle Eddie. He was one of those family names that only came up in whispers or warnings. My grandmother mentioned him once or twice when I was little. Always the same tone. Disappointed. Sharp. Like even saying his name left a taste she didn't like. He was my mother's older brother. The black sheep. The one who didn't fit. The one the family cut off before I was born. I never met him. Not once. And my mother made sure of that. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "We refuse it. Mom, it's a house. It's his house. I don't want anything from him. I should have let it go. That would have been the easy thing." But something about the letter kept pulling at me. Maybe it was the fact that this man, this uncle I never knew, had left everything to my mother. Not to a charity. Not to a stranger. To her. After 40 years of silence. I looked up the address that night. The house was in a rough neighborhood on Cleveland's east side. Satellite images showed a small 2-story place with boarded windows and an overgrown yard. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The estimated value was almost nothing. Barely worth the land it sat on. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. 2 days later, I drove back to Greenfield. I told my mother we should at least go see it. If it was worthless, fine. We'd sign it over to the county. Walk away. But we owed it to ourselves to look. She stared at me for a long time. Then she said, "He was not a good man, Claire. What did he do? He made people uncomfortable. He didn't know how to be normal. That's not the same thing as being bad." She didn't answer, but she got her coat. We drove to Cleveland the next morning. 3 hours in the car. She barely spoke the whole way. I tried the radio. She turned it off. I tried conversation. She gave me one-word answers. I asked her once, somewhere around Mansfield, if she was okay. She said, "Just drive, Claire." So I did. Whatever this house was, whatever Edward Purcell meant to her, it was sitting in her chest like a stone she'd been carrying for decades. And now someone had asked her to look at it. We pulled up to 4412 Arden Road just after noon. The house looked worse in person. Paint peeling, gutters hanging loose, a chain-link fence with no gate. The yard was knee-high with dead grass. A neighbor across the street watched us from behind a screen door but didn't come out. I had the key the lawyer had mailed. It fit the front lock, but the door stuck. I had to push hard with my shoulder. When it opened, I expected the worst. Mold, rot, the smell of something left to die. But that's not what we found. The air inside was cool, dry, almost clean. The furniture was covered in white sheets, like someone had tucked the house in for a long sleep. There was no smell of decay, no water damage on the ceiling. The floors were dusty but solid, and the lights worked. I flipped a switch by the front door and the hallway lit up. My mother noticed it too. Someone had been paying the electric bill for a house nobody lived in. For years. We moved through the rooms slowly. A small kitchen with dishes stacked neatly in the cabinet. A living room with a covered couch and a single bookshelf. A bathroom with a medicine cabinet that still had toothpaste in it. Everything was plain, sparse. There was nothing personal anywhere. No photos on the walls. No letters on the counter. No sign that anyone had lived here with any kind of warmth. Then I found the stairs to the basement. They were behind a door in the hallway, painted the same color as the wall so you'd almost miss it. I opened it and looked down. Concrete steps. A pull chain light at the bottom. "I'm going down," I said. My mother shook her head. "I'll wait up here." I went down alone. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed pipes, a water heater in the corner. Normal. Ordinary. Except for one thing. At the far end, built into the wall, was a steel door. Heavy. Industrial. The kind you'd see on a storage unit or a walk-in freezer. It had a padlock on it. A serious one. "Mom," I called up. "There's a door down here. A locked one." Silence. Then I heard her footsteps. Slow. Reluctant. She came down the stairs one at a time, gripping the railing. When she saw the door, she stopped. Something crossed her face. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Like she'd been expecting this without knowing it. "He always did keep things locked," she whispered. I found a crowbar near the water heater. Old, rusted, but solid enough. I wedged it into the padlock hasp and pulled. Took 3 tries. The metal groaned, then snapped. The lock clattered to the floor. I looked at my mother. She nodded. I pulled the door open. Cool air rushed out. Not basement cool. Climate-controlled cool. Like a museum. Like someone had spent real money keeping this room at exactly the right temperature and humidity. I reached inside and found a light switch. The fluorescent tubes buzzed on one by one. And then we saw it. Every wall. Floor to ceiling. Covered in framed photographs. Hundreds of them. Maybe more. Different sizes, different frames, but all mounted carefully, deliberately, like a gallery. Like someone had spent years arranging them with the kind of attention most people save for things they consider sacred. I stepped inside first. My mother stayed in the doorway. The photos closest to the entrance were of people I didn't recognize right away. Then I looked closer. A woman blowing out candles on a birthday cake. I knew that woman. That was my Aunt Linda. Younger. Maybe 40. The photo was taken from across a parking lot, through a restaurant window. Next to it, a boy in a baseball uniform. My cousin Derek. The photo was shot from behind a chain-link backstop. Far away. Zoomed in. Derek was maybe 10 in the picture. I moved along the wall. More photos. A graduation ceremony. I recognized the banner. Eastwood High School, class of 2003. That was my cousin Maya's graduation. The photo was taken from the back row of the auditorium. Whoever took it was sitting far from the stage. Far from the family. My hands started shaking. I turned to the next wall. And I saw myself. A baby in a hospital bassinet. The photo was taken through a window, a nursery window. There was a reflection in the glass. A man's shape, tall, thin, standing outside. The date on the frame, June 14th, 1987. My birthday. Mom. My voice cracked. Mom, come look at this. She hadn't moved from the doorway. Her hand was on the frame of the steel door like she needed it to stay standing. I can see it from here, she said. I kept going. Every wall told the same story. Every photo was taken from a distance, from behind, from across the street, from the edge of a crowd. Edward Purcell had been at every family event for 40 years. He never approached, never introduced himself, never waved. He just watched. He stood in the margins of our lives and he documented every single moment we shared without him. And nobody knew. I reached the far wall, the one directly across from the door, and I understood immediately why there was a chair in the center of the room. A single wooden chair, old but sturdy, positioned to face this one wall and nothing else. This wall was different. It was dedicated to one person, my mother. Her wedding day, 1976. Shot from across the church parking lot. Her standing in the doorway in her white dress, laughing at something my father said. Her holding me as a newborn, taken through our kitchen window from the yard. Her at my father's funeral, 2011. Standing at the graveside, a figure barely visible in the tree line behind the cemetery. That was him. Her moving into Greenfield Assisted Living. A photo of the front entrance. Her walking through the door with a small suitcase, taken from a car parked across the street. Every chapter of her life, framed, preserved, watched, and pinned beneath the wedding photo, a handwritten note. The paper was old but the writing was steady, careful. I leaned in and read it out loud. You told me to leave and never come back. I left, but I never looked away, not once. I hope you had a beautiful life, sister. From where I stood, it looked perfect. My mother's knees gave out. Not dramatically, not like in the movies. She just folded, like the bones in her legs had quietly decided they were done. Caught her. We sat on the cold floor of that room together, surrounded by 40 years of silent devotion. She cried in a way I had never heard before. Not loud, deep. The kind of crying that comes from a place so far down you didn't even know it was there. I thought he forgot us, she said. I thought he didn't care. I held her. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. After a long time, she steadied herself. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked around the room slowly. Really looked. She reached out and touched a photo near the floor. Me. First day of kindergarten. A small girl with a backpack too big for her body, standing at a school entrance. The photo was taken from across the street. She almost smiled. Almost. At least now we know, she said quietly. He wasn't what they said he was. I nodded. We sat there in the stillness for a while. Felt like an ending. A sad one, but a complete one. The kind of moment where you take a breath and accept what you've found and prepare yourself to leave it behind. Let's go home, Claire, she said. I stood up, reached for her hand to help her to her feet. And that's when I saw it. Behind the chair, on the floor, half hidden beneath a cloth. A small wooden box, dark wood well made with brass hinges. And carved into the lid in letters that had been cut by hand, was a name. Claire. My name. I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. I lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of envelopes, sealed, each one dated and addressed to me. Not mailed, never mailed, just written, sealed, and placed in this box like someone was keeping a promise to a conversation that never happened. I pulled one out. The date on the front, June 14th, 1993, my 6th birthday. I opened it. The handwriting was the same as the note on the wall. Neat, deliberate. It read, Dear Claire, you turned 6 today. Your mother brought a cake to the park on Elm Street. Chocolate with pink frosting. You wore a yellow dress and you laughed so hard at something your father said that you fell off the bench. I was sitting in my car across the road. I almost got out. I almost walked over and introduced myself. But your mother's words are louder than my courage. So I stayed. Happy birthday, Claire. I hope you always laugh like that. Your Uncle Eddie. Couldn't breathe. I pulled out another. June 14th, 2005. My 18th birthday. Dear Claire, you graduated yesterday. I was in the parking lot. You looked so much like your mother at that age it nearly broke me. I wanted to tell you I was proud. I am proud. Of a niece I've never held. Another. Dated 2010. Dear Claire, I heard you got married. I was outside the church. I stood behind the oak tree near the parking lot. You looked beautiful. Your mother cried. I did too. Another. 2016. Dear Claire, I'm sorry about the divorce. I don't know the details and I don't need to. I just hope you're okay. I hope someone is checking on you. If I could, I would. Every letter was like that. Warm, specific, detailed. He didn't just watch from a distance. He paid attention. He noticed things. He knew things about my life that a stranger standing 50 yards away shouldn't have been able to know. I turned to my mother. She was watching me. Her face had changed. The grief was still there, but something else was coming through now. Something sharper. He wrote to me. I said, every year. For my entire life. She didn't answer. I found one more letter. Dated to my 16th birthday. It described a moment at the mall. He'd seen me shopping with friends. He was 10 feet away. He turned around and left because my mother's words were still ringing in his ears after all those years. Mom, what exactly did you say to him? She was quiet for a long time. Then, I told him if he ever came near my family again, I'd call the police. Why? Because my mother told me to. Because the whole family said he was dangerous. Because I was young and I believed them. Was he? Was he dangerous? No. Her voice was barely a whisper. He was just different. He was quiet. He didn't fit. And that was enough for them. Believe me when I tell you, the weight of that sentence filled the entire room. Edward Purcell wasn't cast out for being violent. Not for being cruel. Not for being a threat. He was cast out for being quiet. For being odd. For making people uncomfortable at dinner tables and family gatherings. For not fitting the image the Purcell family had built for themselves. And my mother had been the one to deliver the final blow. The youngest sister, the one he loved most. She told him to leave and he left. And he spent the next 40 years loving her from the other side of the glass. I reached into the bottom of the box. There was one more envelope, thicker than the others, sealed with wax. On the front, in Edward's handwriting, only if Margaret comes. He knew. He knew that if this room was ever found, it would probably be by a lawyer or a contractor or a stranger with a crowbar. But this last letter, this one was only meant to be opened if my mother walked through that door herself. If she cared enough to come. I handed it to her. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't open it. I helped her. Inside was a single photograph. Old, faded at the edges. 2 children standing in a backyard. A boy maybe 7. A girl maybe 5. Holding hands. Squinting against the sun. The boy had dark hair and serious eyes. The girl had a gap-toothed smile. On the back, in pencil, he'd written, "This is the last time you held my hand. I never forgot how it felt. I hope you didn't either." My mother broke. Not the quiet crying from before. This was something else. This was 40 years of certainty collapsing in on itself. 40 years of believing she'd done the right thing. 40 years of telling herself he didn't care, he moved on, he probably forgot us. And here was the proof that none of it was true. He remembered. He stayed. He loved her every single day from a distance she never knew was so small. If this story has reached you, consider subscribing. It means more than you know. I sat beside her on that cold concrete floor. Neither of us spoke. But something had shifted between us. Something fundamental. The guilt was no longer abstract. It had a face. It had handwriting. It had 40 years of letters that were never sent and photographs that were never shown and a love that was never once acknowledged. After a while, I started looking through the room again. Not the photos this time. The small things. The details. There was a desk in the corner I hadn't noticed before. Small. Wooden. A drawer underneath. I opened it. Inside was a cassette player. Old. The kind with the built-in speaker and the clunky buttons. Beside it, a single tape. A white label on the front. Written in Edward's hand. For Margaret. When she's ready. I brought it to my mother. She looked at it like it might bite her. Do you want to hear it? I asked. She didn't answer for a long time. She just stared at the tape. Then she said, "Play it." I pressed the button. There was a hiss, a crackle, then a voice. A man's voice. Older, soft, steady in the way that people are when they've rehearsed something 1,000 times in their head. "Margaret, it's Eddie. I don't know if you'll ever hear this. I don't know if you'll ever come to this house. But if you're listening, then you came. And that's more than I ever let myself hope for." He paused. Then he continued. "I want you to know that I understood. I understood why you told me to leave. The family was afraid of what they didn't understand, and you were young and you trusted them. I would have done the same thing. I don't blame you. I never did. I forgave you the same year you told me to go. Took about a week, actually. I was angry for about a week. Then I missed you, and the missing never stopped." My mother's hand found mine. She gripped it hard. I watched from a distance because I chose to, not because you asked me to. You asked me to leave and I did. But you never asked me to stop loving you. Nobody can ask that. So I didn't. His voice was calm, measured, like he was reading from something he'd written and rewritten 100 times. "I watched Claire grow up. She has your stubbornness, Margaret, and our father's laugh. Did you ever notice that? She throws her head back the same way he did. I noticed it when she was about 12. I was watching her at a school picnic from across the field. She laughed at something and I almost lost it right there in the parking lot because for a second it was Dad standing there." He paused again. "Longer this time. I kept this room because memory is the only inheritance I had to leave. I couldn't give you money. I couldn't give you time. But I could give you proof. Proof that you were never alone. Not for one single day." I looked at my mother. She wasn't wiping her tears anymore. She'd given up on that. "I don't know what happens after this. I don't know if there's anything after this. But if there is, I'll be watching from a distance. Same as always. It's what I'm good at." Another pause. Then quieter. "Goodbye, Margaret. Thank you for the life I got to see from the outside." It was enough. It had to be. The tape clicked off. The room was silent except for the hum of the climate control and my mother's breathing. She stood up slowly, walked to the chair. His chair. The one that faced her wall. She sat down in it. She looked at the photographs. She looked at herself through his eyes. Every moment she thought was private. Every joy, every loss, every ordinary afternoon. He witnessed it. He was there for all of it. "I'm sorry, Eddie," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I knelt beside her, took her hand. We stayed like that for a long time, the photographs watching us from every wall. A lifetime of love arranged in frames by a man who asked for nothing in return. We left the basement eventually, walked back through the house. It looked different now. The covered furniture, the clean floors, the electricity still running after all those years. This wasn't an abandoned house. It never was. It was a vigil, a monument, a man's entire life condensed into a quiet act of devotion that nobody was supposed to see. We stepped outside. The afternoon light was gray. Cleveland in early spring, cold and flat. Neither of us felt it. I drove us to a motel off the highway. My mother didn't speak the whole way. She held the childhood photo in her lap. The one of her and Eddie, 2 kids in a backyard, holding hands. That night, she fell asleep early. The day had taken everything out of her. I sat on my bed in the motel room with the lamp on and the curtains closed and opened the box of letters again. I read them one by one, slowly, carefully. Every year of my life, documented by a man I never met. His handwriting changed over the decades. Steadier in the early years, shakier toward the end. But the tone never changed. Warm, careful, specific. He never complained. Never asked for pity. Never said anything bitter about the family that threw him out. Every letter was about me, about what he noticed, about what he wished he could say if the world had been different. And then I found something I'd missed earlier, tucked between two letters from the late 90s. A receipt from a financial services company. A deposit into something called the Purcell Educational Trust. Dated 1998, the year I started college. I looked it up on my phone. The Purcell Educational Trust had funded a scholarship I received my freshman year. I'd always been told it was a general academic award. It wasn't. It was Edward. He paid for part of my education and routed it through a fake trust so nobody would know. I kept reading. In a letter from 2011, the year my father died, Edward mentioned sending flowers to the funeral. From an old friend. I remembered those flowers. White lilies. My mother had wondered who sent them. She never found out. In another letter from 2019, he mentioned making a donation to my daughter's school fundraiser. Anonymous. $20. Enough to matter. Small enough to disappear. He didn't just watch. He participated. Quietly. Without credit. Without acknowledgement. He wove himself into the edges of our lives so carefully that we never felt the thread. I closed the box. Lay down on the motel bed. Stared at the ceiling. This man they called crazy. This man they called a hermit and a waste and a problem. He was the most devoted person in our family. And we threw him away. The next morning, my mother was up before me. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, dressed, coat on. She looked at me and said, "I want to find where he's buried." We drove to the east side of Cleveland. It took a few phone calls to the lawyer's office to get the information. The secretary was patient with us. She said Edward had made all the arrangements years in advance. Paid for the plot himself. Paid for the headstone. Specified no service. No announcements. No obituary. He didn't want anyone to feel obligated. Even in death, he was trying not to be a burden. Edward was buried in a small cemetery called Restfield. It sat behind a strip mall on a road I'd never driven before. The gate was open but the grounds were mostly empty. A few older headstones near the back. A maintenance shed with a riding mower parked outside. We found his headstone in the third row. It was simple. Gray stone. His name. His dates. Nothing else. No flowers. No flags. No indication that anyone had ever stood where we were standing. My mother walked up to it alone. I stayed back by the car. I could see her, but I couldn't hear her. She stood there for a long time. Then she started talking. I don't know everything she said, but I caught pieces carried back by the wind. She told him she was wrong. She told him she was afraid and young and stupid, and she listened to people who were louder than her own heart. She told him she wished she had opened one of those letters. Just one. Knocked on his door. Picked up the phone. Anything. She told him she remembered the backyard. She remembered holding his hand. She remembered the way he used to read to her before bed because their mother worked late and their father wasn't around. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out the photograph. The two of them as children. She leaned it against the headstone. Gently. Like she was setting down something she should have carried a long time ago. "I held your hand once, Eddie," she said. "And I should have never let go." I walked over. Stood beside her. She took my arm. We stayed there until the wind picked up and the sky went dark. On the drive back to Columbus, she told me she wasn't selling the house. I didn't argue. I already knew. "He kept it for us," she said. "The least we can do is keep it for him." Weeks later, I went back to Cleveland alone. I cleaned the house. Opened the curtains for the first time in what must have been years. Swept the floors. Wiped down the counters. Let light into rooms that hadn't seen it in a long time. I didn't change much. I didn't rearrange the furniture or take down the sheets that still covered the couch. I didn't want to. The house was his and it deserved to stay that way. I just wanted it to feel lived in again. Even if just for an afternoon. But I did go back to the basement. I opened the steel door and stepped into the room again. The cool air. The hum of the climate unit. The photographs. I sat in his chair. The one that faced my mother's wall. I looked at the photos the way he must have looked at them. Night after night, year after year. A life he loved but couldn't touch. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photograph I'd printed that morning. A picture I took at the cemetery. My mother standing at Edward's grave. Her hand resting on the top of the headstone. Her head bowed. I found an empty space on the wall. Near the bottom, next to a photo of my mother walking into Greenfield. I hung it there, pressed the frame flat against the wall, stepped back. "Now you're on the wall too, Uncle Eddie," I whispered. "Where you always belonged." The room was quiet. The photos watched from every direction. 40 years of silent devotion, finally seen, finally understood. And somewhere in the stillness, I swear I felt it. Something warm, something patient, something that had been waiting a very long time to be noticed. I turned off the light, closed the steel door, walked up the stairs and out of the house. The sky over Cleveland was wide and gray, and I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing it in. Then I locked the front door and put the key in my pocket. Not because I was closing anything, because I was keeping it safe.